My parents always called me a problem child. They were constantly receiving letters from school about my bad behavior. He's a moody brat. He won't tidy up his room. You're 12 years old. Grow up. It always felt like my parents were out to get me. My brothers got into trouble all the time. Just last month, my parents caught Thomas sleeping with his girlfriend in their bed, and all he got was a swatting. Why wasn't he being taken to the psychiatrist? My father looked at me as we pulled into the parking lot. Come on, Howard. Get the dumb look off your face. It's only an hour. You'll be in and out before you know it. Mom chimed in. You're the one forcing us to come here. You know how much time I lost on my art project by having to take Thomas to get his damned tooth fixed over you? You boys and your dang rocks. I breathed in deep, wanting to speak out against my parents, but I was in no place to do so. I opened the car door, left the vehicle, then slammed it shut. My father scowled at me, but the jolt of victorious spite I felt running through me was worth it. We made our way into the hospital, shivering over the snowy weather. Once inside, my parents spoke to the attendant at the front desk. I didn't pay attention to what they were saying, though. Looking out through the window at the children playing outside, they were throwing snowballs at each other and building a snowman. The radio said school was out today. Johnny was trying to have the boys and girls duke it out in a giant snowball fight. They needed me. I had the best aim, after all. But here I am, forced to go talk to some dumb old guy about my problems. My dad looked down at me. Come on, Howard. He ushered me along, and as we walked, I overheard some nurses speaking. They talked about a guest at the hospital and some sort of new procedure that was in the works. I didn't quite catch the rest of it as I was led to room 604. Underneath the numbers was the name of the doctor. There was something weird about the sign, though. Unlike the rest of them, the doctor's name was taped over by a post-it note. A note which read, Dr. Walter Freeman. My parents told me to wait in the room while they went to go speak with the doctor. I asked, Where's Mr. Crowley? Where's my regular doctor? To which my mother replied, He's out of town, sweetie. She left after that, and I began to look around the room with feigned interest. Cotton swabs, an exam table, and medical instruments. Though I noticed something peculiar on the countertop. Newspaper. Something to help my boredom, I thought. I walked over to the newspaper and grabbed it. The headline read, The treatment taking the medical world by storm, transorbital lobotomy. Beneath the headline was a picture of a tool. It looked strikingly familiar to that of an ice pick. As I was about to flip the page, a familiar voice rang through my ears. Sit your butt right down now, mister. I jumped and swore underneath my breath, walking back to the exam table afterwards. She snatched the paper out of my hand and glared at me. Out from the corner of the door, I saw a shadowy figure looming over us both. He was a middle-aged man, balding, wore oval glasses, dressed in a sharp brown vest and a white undershirt, fixed with a vibrant red tie. He didn't look like any of the staff working here, yet he gave off an aura that commanded respect. My mother knelt down and looked me eye to eye. Now, Howard, we're going to need to have a longer chat with Mr. Freeman here. It's about your visit today, and if we set things up properly, you might not have to come back here again. Doesn't that sound good, sweetie? She ended cheerfully. The smile on my face was the size of a saucer. The thought of not having to come back here was a blessing. I nodded to my mother. That'd be great. We'll be back again soon, Mr. Dolly. They both left the room, leaving me alone for what seemed like a good 30 minutes. I was on the verge of taking a nap when the doctor from earlier entered the room to find me laying down with my hands behind my head. Hello there, Mr. Dolly. He sat up. Just Howard is fine. Mr. Dolly, I just finished speaking with your parents, and they've decided you'd be a perfect candidate for a new procedure that's making the rounds across this country. It would fix all the behavement issues your parents speak in length about. Please, put this on. I was slightly dissuaded by how he still referred to me as Mr. Dolly, though it wasn't the last time someone disregarded what I asked for. The thought slipped my mind as I caught the gown he threw at me. Walter watched as I stripped down to my boxers and put the gown on. He nodded his head like this was something to be approved of. Good, now follow me. He left the office and walked me down to the inner workings of the hospital. The doctor opened up a double door which led to a giant operating theater. The auditorium was packed with students in doctors' outfits. They were staring at me with an air of intrigue. I heard a woman sitting above the door speak to a friend. Is he really gonna operate on a kid? Oh yeah, he's operated on a lot of kids. One of them was 4 years old. Don't worry, Freeman knows what he's doing. Dr. Freeman walked me to the center of the room and patted his hand on the table. Sit, boy. Your parents agreed that for no bill, I'm able to demonstrate the procedure to a public audience. I began to feel uneasy about this, though the thought of not having to come back here was making me go forward with it. I took my steps towards the stepping stool, helping me to get up onto the elevated table. I laid down and looked up at the unfamiliar doctor. He turned his gaze away from me and spoke to the crowd. Hello there. Today we will be exploring one of the most notable medical advancements of the last century. A miracle that cures everything from schizophrenia, depression, bipolarism, and even bad attitudes, he said with a glance down to me. I wanted to spit in his face. He was making a show of me. His attention returned back to the crowd. This operation, patented by the genius that is Antonio Igaz Moniz. Now I bring you all a revolution, reducing a surgery that takes hours down to just a few minutes. With the use of just a few tools and a steady hand, the world of psychiatric treatment will change forever. The audience clapped wildly after he finished. I had no idea what was going on. Speaking up, I pleaded, What are you going to perform on me anyways, Doc? Don't worry, Mr. Dolly. It's nothing too dangerous. Just relax. You'll be out of here before you know it. Maybe even able to go play in the snow after all this is over. He grabbed my head and gently pushed it down to the table. All the while, he held a small grin on his face. He covered it with a facial mask and then turned to his assistant. My heart was racing. Miss Jillian, hand me the electrodes, please. I gazed upwards at the ceiling in suspense, long-winded breaths escaping me. Despite the packed auditorium, I felt alone. The room felt dark, and the only thing I truly felt was the physician's hands placing two metallic objects up against my temples. Time stood still for what seemed like a good minute. Then, out of nowhere, the first spark hit me. My legs shook and I jolted forward. I felt like something was running around in my head, bouncing around like my brain was a giant pinball machine. I wanted to scream, but my mouth wouldn't move. My lips felt wet. Saliva running down my face. I blinked without any symmetry, one eye, then the next. I tried to catch the doctor's words. Did you The machine was shut down and I caught my breath. I didn't feel right though. My legs were numb, my chest was in pain. As well, my eyes felt like they were going to pop out of my head. I didn't feel the doctor touch my eyelids, but I could see his index finger peeling them back to gaze into my pupils with a bright flashlight. He'd be under if you just did your job right. Do it again. Crank it up as well. I heard the sound of his footsteps leaving my side. He began to wash his hands, but as soon as I heard the water pour from the tap, the second jolt hit me much harder than the first. My chest heaved forward and my mouth opened as wide as it could. I screamed. I forced myself to scream, but nothing came out. Jitters ran through my body and it felt like insects were running around underneath my skin. My head snapped back as a gargling noise escaped through my throat. It felt like my heart was going to pop by the time the currents ended. Everything was in a fog, my eyes cloudy. I could barely see a foot in front of me. I didn't feel the doctor touch my eyelids after the jolts ended. Even the feeling of the light shining down into my pupils was mute. He nodded down at my lifeless body. Now, usually you wouldn't need all these accessories, A simple Orbitoclast and an electroshock machine would be all you need. But under your hospital's guidelines, we are going to be using these facial masks, gloves, and this overhead light to ensure accuracy. Freeman looked down at my face and lifted up my eyelid once more, holding it down so I couldn't blink. I gazed up in terror as I saw what the doctor was doing. A sharp metal pick was hovering above my vision. He ran his free hand over the back of my head and pushed a sharp metal object down into the corner of my eye socket. I wanted to cry out, but the jolts from earlier made it hard to fight back. I was paralyzed. Every ounce of my soul wanted to fight back, push him off me, but I just couldn't. The pick slid past my eye, brushing past flesh I never thought would feel the sensation of touch. My body numb, but I could still feel the cold steel. He pressed down gently. I felt the base of the long metal object running across my eyeball. Nurse, hold the patient still while I get the other Orbitoclast inserted. He returned with another one of the picks, doing the same with my other eye. The lid was lifted and I felt the familiar sensation of the large pick running down along the inside of my head. This time though, the doctor's hands weren't as steady and I felt the metal grind against my eye. He loomed over me. All I could see was his face, right in the middle of these giant picks he's inserted into my eye sockets. His eyes glimmered. He seemed so happy about what he was doing. Now, pay attention. This final part is delicate. I know it's a mallet, but you don't need to drive too far forward. You could injure your patient. The words shook me to my very core. I could raise my hand, but not enough that I could fight back. I was left with nothing to do but watch. He hit the mallet against the handle, and I felt it drive down into depths that shouldn't be touched. The sound of my skull cracking echoed throughout my head. He hit the pick again, launching the pick further. I almost fainted then and there, but I couldn't close my eyes. The cold metal ran along the insides of my skull, scraping away at my head until he pulled it out. I felt a warm drop of gooey flesh land on my cheek as he set the object aside and began work on the other eye. The familiar ring inside of my skull as the doctor did his work, breaking through my head and cutting up parts of my brain. I felt a haze wash over me, like the hardest drug that one could take to calm themselves. Nurse, get the camera and take a picture of this. I heard the snapshot of a camera, and the doctor finished, pulling out the other Orbitoclast, peeling down his face mask, and smiling at his work. I finally passed out to the sound of roaring applause. I awoke in a bed a few hours later. My eyes were sore and my mind was amiss. I felt blank. The clock in the corner of the room read 4 p.m. Only 6 hours since we came here this morning. I got up. My legs were shaky, but I managed to get up and walk over to the window. I parted the sheets and looked out into the snow. There were kids playing, throwing snowballs at one another. At first, I thought I should go and play with them, but I don't feel like playing anymore. Hello everyone, I hope you enjoyed the little story I've supplied today. Happy Halloween, of course, and no need to worry, I'm not becoming another narration channel. The stories on this channel will still focus solely on things based in reality. This was just a little work of fiction based in part about our next topic, Dr. Walter Freeman. As always, music will be supplied in the description below. Have a happy Halloween and stay safe, everyone. I'll see you all again soon.